it was something that brought me joy. So whatever season you are in, even if it's a trying season, you can find things that bring you joy in that season. And that is something that you have absolute control over. And what that taught me was I was sharing what I loved, what brought me joy. And I started having different brands reach out to me to leverage my influence. I absolutely loved my conversation with Amy about her journey to short-term rentals, her journey through her career, her journey to just be okay with not necessarily achieving like a societal norm of success. She had checked all the boxes. She'd done all the things. She had gone to school, gotten the great job, promoted very quickly within there. And I relate to a lot of that in my own story. And you may have caught it in the episode with Amy, you may not have, but Amy's my mindset coach. And I think that mindset work, people just kind of brush over a fair amount of the time and chalk it up to, woo woo. I don't need that. I just need to work harder. I need to, work on something else in my business. If I can just figure out how to run my finances, if I can just figure out how to make more sales, if I can just figure out, fill in the blank, I will be successful. I will be happy. I will be, whatever that is. And part of my journey is, one, I have a pretty strong faith, and I recognize that, my worth is not found in material things. It's nice, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't driven by financial security, time, freedom, those types of things. But at the end of the day, I realize my worth is not rooted in those things. I recognize not everybody shares that belief, but for me, it's been more than that. And I've had to shift a lot of things in my mindset to understand why I do the things that I do, what patterns I have as an individual, whether that's positive or negative. Amy's story just brought out a lot of that. And I wanted to share with you guys a little bit more of my story. So in high school, things came pretty easily to me. I wasn't top of my class, but I was pretty dang close. I got a scholarship to go to Virginia Tech on a biology degree because I thought that I wanted to go to medical school. I realized looking back, I liked the idea of medical school. I liked the idea of being the boss. I liked the idea of being in charge. And, a couple of years in, I realized, one, I hate blood and guts. So being a doctor probably isn't going to be for me. That was pretty difficult for me because I had put my identity in the thought of achieving and, working towards that goal. And, as a 19, 20-year-old, making that shift was kind of hit hard when I felt like all of my friends had it figured out. What I did was I went through a fair amount of personality testing, aptitude testing, and what it pegged me at was really good at business and entrepreneurship. And granted, I had senior year of high school, I sold Cutco knives of all things. Yeah, I sold Cutco knives. I ended up being their number one salesperson on the Eastern Seaboard my senior year of high school. It's just kind of my personality of, if I'm going to do something, I'm not going to half-ass it, and I'm really going to go all in. As an aside, I have a running list of my parents' friends and, people who were close to who have Cutco knives injuries because these knives were so stinking sharp that they didn't realize it. My favorite story of when I was doing a presentation of these knives, we brought a tomato or something for them to cut, and she set the knife on the table and leaned forward to chat with me, and her elbow leaned on the knife. And all of a sudden, it started bleeding on the table, and there was a pool of blood. And I said, I'm so sorry, but you seem to have cut yourself with a knife and you're bleeding. She's like, well, I'll be darned, that thing was sharp. I didn't even feel it. That's a dang good knife. And you know what? She ended up buying it, folks. So, anyways, that was very tangential. But I got my start of doing my own thing, making my own money, selling knives of all things. In college, when I went through that aptitude testing and that pegged me as being good at business or entrepreneurship, it made a lot of sense to me. But the university I was at, Virginia Tech, I had already done so many of my core classes in the beginning that were attributed to my major. They told me I was going to have to take an entire year if I wanted to change my major and add that on to my time there. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing it. I'm going to finish out pre-med biology and, call it a day. If I'm being perfectly honest, it was one of the hardest seasons of my life. Just feeling like what I was doing was a waste of time. It didn't work with my personality really at all. And I just felt like I was checking the box to check a box, which just does not sit really well with me at all. After school, well, during that time, I was doing business internships and working at our family's government contracting company. And, upon graduation, I stepped in at the level of COO because I had been working in this business. I understood it better than anybody. I had come in and, worked since I was a child. Essentially, I was in this building. So I understood the inner workings of what the business was. And I came in and with fresh eyes, revolutionized the technology in the space and really brought it up to the 21st century. And we had a pretty large season of exponential growth. And I will never forget that season of my life because I was able to have a fairly safe place to think big, try new things, learn how to manage people and processes. And 22, 23, I oversaw a multi-million-dollar statewide contract. And the people who were calling me are, the Secretary of State of, whatever state that was. I won't get into the weeds because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but I had a crap ton of responsibility at a very young age to oversee all of these projects. And I share a bunch of my story about, earning people a bunch of money and not building anything for myself. But one of the key takeaways from my entire journey and Amy's journey is no training is ever wasted. And I want to encourage you, wherever you are, even if you feel like you're on a hamster wheel and you're tired of what you're doing, the process and the commitment to doing what you're doing wherever you are and doing it well is something that has translated into every season of my life. And there's been a skill that I have developed and curated and practiced in every season that serves me to this day. College, even though I felt like I was wasting my time learning something that I would never use, what it taught me how to do was to find information, to seek it out, also to find who's in my group. So people who, if I didn't necessarily understand it, who can I go to help me understand this better instead of relying on myself to figure that piece out. In the season where I was kind of cutting my teeth in corporate and business and government world, while I realize now that my life passion is absolutely not secure IDs and printing and, plastics, it taught me what it takes to be in charge. Like the buck stopped with me on so many different things. And, it's fun to have a title, but there's also a crap ton of responsibility that comes with it. Just cutting my teeth with leadership as well, of understanding how people work, interpersonal relationships, a lot of times the only women in a room, and learning how to stand up for myself in those situations. It's never a wasted season, even if you feel like you are starting to outgrow it. The other thing that I did during that time and that season as the COO of a government contracting company is I sought out a creative outlet. I was spending over 100 nights a year in hotels and traveling to different cities because I was working with these, different government agencies. And so I started a lifestyle website called Moderately High Maintenance. My husband would now say that there's nothing moderate about it, even though he coined the name the first time. But what I was sharing was just things that made me light up, whether that was recipes or different things that I found when I was traveling, like restaurants or things to do in all of these different cities, sharing life on my farm. I have dwarf goats and horses and Great Pyrenees and chickens and the whole thing's another fun thing about me. It was something that brought me joy. So whatever season you are in, even if it's a trying season, you can find things that bring you joy in that season. And that is something that you have absolute control over. And what that taught me was I was sharing what I loved, what brought me joy. And I started having different brands reach out to me to leverage my influence. So brand partnerships, brands like Delta Airlines, Target, Wayfair, All Modern. And countless other big brands traveled to hotels for free to share my experience there. And the lesson that I learned there was when you find something that you love and you do it because you love it, the money will absolutely follow. And even if you're in a season of life where you don't necessarily like your job, things don't necessarily seem to be going your way, there is always room for you to add some sort of creative outlet. Find what you love to do and do more of it. That business, that moderately high maintenance lifestyle website, is what ultimately led me to starting MHM, moderately high maintenance luxury properties. And our very first property, we knew we wanted to get into real estate. I had managed a long-term rental portfolio for a couple of years, and all that taught me was that tenants and toilets were not for me. The return on the investment was not worth, the amount of efforts that it takes. And so I said, let's give short-term rentals a try. The tax benefits are amazing. I think that we can set it up to run it fairly easily. We'd stayed in a bunch of Airbnbs and I thought, somebody's making a crap ton of money here. If I'm running these numbers correctly, I bet I can do it too. And I said, let's see how I can put my unique giftings and talents. It sounds like it would be fun. We searched high and low. I invested in my education, joined a bunch of programs that just gave me a bunch of really generalized information that I had a very difficult time taking down to my specific market, my financial situation. And it was really hard. I scoured my market that I wanted to be in for 8 months before we finally made an offer on our first property. That offer fell through. And then we found another property that ended up being perfect. I took the things that I had loved, that I enjoyed sharing, the brands that I had partnerships with from moderately high maintenance, and I created a physical representation of all of the things that I had loved in this space because I wanted my community to have a place that represented all that I had shared. And that eventually turned into my brand standard. It was something that lit me up inside, and I absolutely loved it. And I had the bug. I said, you know what? This is something I can really, really get behind. And I don't think that I would have recognized that in myself had I not gone through those harder seasons of life, but also like showing up very well in those hard seasons of like, I don't know what this time in my life is teaching me, but I'm going to show up and I'm going to give it my best. And taking all of those different seasons of life, the lessons that I learned, and then ultimately finding this business that brought out so many of my giftings and talents and my zones of genius was just truly a gift. And once we saw how successful property number 1 was, we grew to 5 more in 6 months, which was pretty wild. And it took all of that, COO, people, processes, all of that training. It tested every single bit of that to scale that quickly, purchase those properties and really build out that portfolio. But I think at the end of the day, my success boils down to is my commitment to quality and doing a job well, always making sure that even if I'm struggling personally in a situation, that I have the mindset to, one, know I don't have to stay stuck if I'm not happy with something, being willing to make a change even though it's scary. Like Amy's story, I was successful by all, exterior reviews. People told us, like, you're crazy. Now is not the time to buy into real estate. I mean, you both have really good things going. You're just had a baby. When we were scaling to the 5, I was pregnant with our second son. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, you don't have the bandwidth for this. Like, why are you starting a new business? You are just going to take over the family business. You're already COO. Like, what's going on? And at the end of the day, secure plastics and printing didn't light me up. And I knew I was never going to reach my full potential in something that didn't light me up. And it just took a little bit of life living to recognize that and build up that courage to make a change. Some of the things that I have really found to be powerful, I love to read. Some of the books that I read when I was just getting started in my journey with short-term rentals, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is one of my absolute favorites. One of the books that I come back to time and time again about building healthy habits and lifestyles is Atomic Habits, is another phenomenal book that I keep going back to and reading because, especially in seasons where things don't necessarily light me up, I go back to my habits and what are the things that I do every single day that add up to big success. A book that I'm reading right now is Who, Not How. And I just think that's such a powerful book for entrepreneurs to understand that you aren't alone. And in order to achieve big things, you need to have other people who have been ahead of you in that journey to help you along the way, because you'll be able to achieve things bigger and things faster. So thank you guys for listening to my story. My hope for you is that you hear this story, and no matter what season you are in your life, whether it's a good season or a season where you're just struggling to figure out what it is that lights you up, that you have the courage to address that head on and have a really honest conversation with yourself about, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Is this my purpose? And if not, start seeking out the things in your life that you want to change, because at the end of the day, you can create the life you want to live. You don't have to stay stuck.